My name's Colin, this is my channel, the Anemone channel, and I do live in Bath, but today you find me in Manchester, where I will be attending the Manchester Animation Festival. Just one day in here this time, although I did travel overnight last night and then I'll travel overnight to get home tomorrow. When I do these little videos, I try to find something historic to record in front of, and that kind of is. I mean, it's more recently historic, but that is what is left of the Hacienda, the legendary nightclub owned by Factory Records owner Tony Wilson, and Factory Records being the record label which had bands like New Order and the Happy Mondays on it. I mean, that is where Manchester was invented in the late 80s, early 90s. Which is significant to me, and it's significant in the modern history of Britain. I mean, indeed, the home cinema, which is just over there and where I'll be watching all the films at the Manchester Animation Festival, its address is Tony Wilson Place. So yeah, Tony Wilson does have some significance, particularly in this little area of Manchester. So yeah, I started travelling last night, and since I was going to be in town late to get to Bristol for my 1 AM coach, I actually watched a couple of films last night. I watched Anemone, which is terminally slow and quiet, and Die My Love, which is a great performance from Jennifer Lawrence, but it's too Lynn Ramsey to be a serious Oscar contender, I think. But yeah, it's a brilliant film with a brilliant performance from Jennifer Lawrence. So yeah, a couple of micro reviews for you there. The 3 animated films I'm going to be seeing today are Little Amélie, or the Character of Rain, and ARCO, both of them from France. Oh, actually, Little Amélie I think might be Belgian, but yeah, French language. And then The Last Blossom, which is a Japanese animation about a regretful Yakuza, I think. All of them played at NLC. ARCO won the main prize at NLC, so it's one of this year's really big animated feature Oscar contenders, and I needed to tick it off the list quickly. I've got a little time for Little Amélie, and I should have time to record my review of Little Amélie after that, but the last 2 films are so close together, they're in the same screening, one after the other, so I'll have to record the reviews of the second 2 films in one go, and then head back to the coach station. Gonna have to find somewhere to record along there. I've got an idea, I'm not sure how feasible it's going to be, but we shall see. I'll record somewhere on the way back to the coach station. If not, I'll record it back in Bath once again. Or even Birmingham and Bristol, which is the steps along my journey up here and back down. But anyway, yes, here we are in Manchester. That used to be the Hacienda, and I will see you after I have seen Little Amélie. So, small change of plans since this morning. This is what I plan to show you on my way home to the coach station, but for varying reasons which I'll get into in a minute, I've decided to do it now instead. So this is part of the infamous Canal Street in Manchester, heart of the gay village in the centre of Manchester, next to the Rochdale Canal, which is at the same time dirtier and more fabulous than the one back at home. But yes, this is Canal Street, and there are rainbow flags absolutely everywhere. So I was scouting around this morning because I had time to kill. My coach going at 7:30, and the first film wasn't until 10:30. And I realised as I was walking to the home cinema, that I was going through the gay village. I thought, oh, that's a good place to record on the way back. But that changed. I'm now doing it between the first and second film of the day for several reasons. Because it's daylight, albeit rather damp and drizzly at the moment. There's less people around, and I've got an awful lot of time to kill before my second film. So I decided to film in the gay village, and as I was scouting around I came across this place. I'm currently sat in Sackville Gardens, which includes a statue tribute to Alan Turing, an appropriate figure to feature in Manchester's gay village, being that he is a gay martyr essentially, and he lived most of the end of his life in Manchester. He basically invented modern computing. He was one of the key figures in inventing modern computing. He broke the Enigma code at Bletchley Park in the Second World War. He was a genius. The Turing test, and you've probably heard of the Turing test. That's this guy. But he was also homosexual, and he was convicted of homosexuality in 1952 and underwent chemical castration or hormone therapy instead of going to jail. And in 1954 he died, and the ruling at the inquest was suicide. He ate a cyanide-laced apple. A cyanide-laced apple. Although the evidence is equally convincing that it was accidental, because his work at the time did involve cyanide, and he was known to be somewhat careless with his chemicals, so it could well have been an accident, but it was ruled a suicide. And either way, his life was ruined, his reputation was ruined, because he was gay. And at the time he was living in Manchester. So yes, Alan Turing is a hero, and I find it very appropriate that I stumbled across this statue when I was looking about this morning. And I love the fact you could maybe just about see that either side of him, I mean that whole bench is part of the sculpture, and either side of him you can see that people have sat on the bench, and you can also see people have also been sitting on his knee because it's been rug shiny, which is that appropriate? I don't know, maybe, who knows. But yes, I think that was rather interesting. But yes, I decided to come here and shoot because I've got plenty of time at the moment and it's daylight. So the first film I saw at Manchester Animation Festival 2025 was Little Amélie, or the Character of Rain. Although I think if the novel or novella that this is based on had been translated more recently, I think it would have been called The Kanji of Rain, because that's what it is. It's the Japanese character for rain, and rain in Japanese is Ame, and the little girl's Amélie, and she's growing up in Japan, so she is Rain, and that becomes part of the thing, because this little girl repeatedly says, I'm Japanese, even though, her family's Belgian. So yeah, I mean that's one of the themes of the film. But what we really have here is a coming of age story, but done in a really, really unique, really, really interesting way. This is a little girl growing up to, basically the end of the film is her third birthday, is essential. Well, no, actually, it's a little bit after it. So, a little bit after her third birthday is the time period that this film goes in. And for the first, a significant chunk of the film, she is absolutely convinced she is God. And everything that comes into me, everything that goes out to me is this special substance. The original title is not Character of Rain, which is the English translation title. The original French title is The Metaphysics of Tubes, which does make sense in the film. It says, it's I'm nothing but a tube, and then the title card comes up. But obviously with the English subtitles that doesn't actually make sense. But anyway. So yeah, I think any small child up to the age of 3, and even later on into life, is convinced that they are the most important entity, being, human in the world. And we have a very, very direct version of that in this little girl, Amélie. She literally and fundamentally believes she is God, until her grandmother shows up and gives her white chocolate from Belgium, because she is Belgian. And the joy she feels about it makes her realise, oh, there is joy in the world and I didn't create it, therefore I'm not God. And it's also helped by a Japanese woman who comes in to be the housekeeper / nanny. And she used to live in this house during the war when she was a girl, because this is set in 1969 into 1970, maybe even 71, but yeah, that time period, very, very late 60s, very, very early 70s. So the war is within living memory, and that becomes an issue, because in understanding, mainly through the actions of this housekeeper / nanny, Nishio-san, mainly through her actions, this little girl Amélie comes to realise she's not God, and also comes to realise that she has a very deep connection with the help, and not necessarily such a strong bond with her actual family. I think a minor part of this is the idea of found family, but there's always that thing of the help, and the barrier, the border between being part of the family and not being part of the family. Where is that line? Is there a line? Should there be a line? And I think there should be more of a line than this, because this little girl Amélie, who, let's not forget, is 2 years old for the vast majority of this film, this 2-year-old girl is spending all her time with Nishio-san, and her parents are perfectly okay with this. They don't bat an eyelid that this little girl is essentially, in the servants' quarters. Not that they have any. It definitely is one of those situations where Nishio-san feels like part of the family. There's even one sequence where this little 2-year-old girl is just doing housework with Nishio-san while her 2 siblings are playing in the yard. So the borderline between a parent and a nanny, a guardian, the help, that's part of this. The border between being Belgian or being white and being Japanese is another part of this. And there's bits from secondary characters that the war is still very, very fresh in certain people's memories. This is only 1969. The war was, 30 years ago? and it's still too fresh in the mind for certain people, and it will never be acceptable for certain people that this little white girl is spending all her time with a Japanese woman. I mean, that's just not how things are done. That's just not right. And I mean, there's fascinating themes explored here. It is mostly a coming of age story. This idea of coming into a sense of self in a really unusual way. But by 3, I think a lot of people, most people, are supposed to have some kind of sense of self, and this little girl Amélie does, and that's the crux of the film. There's also these other things like, you know, parents versus help, Japanese versus Belgian, Eastern versus Western attitudes and philosophies of life. And yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating stuff, and the look of the film is great. And it reminded me a little bit of the guys who did A Cat in Paris and Invisible Boy. I can't remember their names, but it's sort of like a somewhat Painsley style. I mean, we had a little video in introduction from one of the directors and one of the screenwriters, and the director mentioned gouache. I mean, that kind of style, and that's kind of what it looks like. I mean, that somewhat primary, somewhat broad brushstroke colour. I mean, so the look of the film is great as well, and yeah, the story works really, really well. I mean, it works simply as a coming-of-age story, but it's also got all these other themes in it as well. So, yeah, I did really like the little Amélie. And the next question is, what rating do I give it? I'm stuck between a really high meh and a pretty low yay. Yeah, no, I think compared to other animated films I've already seen, I think this is a yay. I think this is well worth watching. It's going to be interesting comparing it to ARCO, who beat it at the Amélie Film Festival. ARCO won the big prize, the Cristal, whereas Little Amélie won the Audience Award, which I can easily understand. So ARCO, I think, is probably the better, or on paper, is the better Oscar contender if any of these films ends up being an Oscar contender. But we are in an era where foreign films do get into the Oscars more easily, so I can see that happening. So yeah, I think ARCO is probably the best shout, but I'm seeing that next. But yes, Little Amélie I think is a solid yay. So yeah, so now I've got a couple of hours to kill before the next film, ARCO, and it's basically immediately follow each other. I mean, you get out of the cinema and go back into the same screen for the next film, so I'm not going to have time to record about the next film. So the next time I record, it'll probably be about the final 2 films I'll see at the festival, ARCO, as I said, and the Japanese film The Last Blossom, which apparently has a director's Q&A. Since the guy's Japanese, I'm not sure how that's going to work. I mean, how good is his English? It'll be interesting to find out. I mean, I'm not massively interested in that one, but it fits into my schedule, so, and it did play at RLC, so yes, next time you see me, I will have 2 films to talk about, but for right now, I think I will go back inside, because it's actually started raining a little bit now. Right, so this is probably the least salubrious place I've recorded one of these links. I'm currently standing in a multi-storey car park in Manchester, which has the benefit of being right next door to the coach station. And I've come here, A, because it's actively raining and I wanted somewhere with a roof, and B, because I'm paranoid about missing my bus. So here we are, standing next to the coach station, with a lot of traffic noise, which is annoying. But anyway, I've got 2 films to talk to you about. In fact, I've got 3 films to talk to you about, because while I was waiting, I had like 4 hours to wait between films 1 and 2. I actually finished Ballad of a Small Player on my tablet. Colin Farrell is very good, but he's got a very big performance, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I also didn't really like the place his character's arc ended. I mean, the end of the film, I just didn't buy what happens to that character by the end of the film. So, good performance, not a great film. So that's Ballad of a Small Player for you. But the first of the film I want to talk about, and I did make notes, is ARCO. So yeah, this was an interesting one. This is the film that won the big award at the ARCO Animation Festival this year, so by default it's a contender at the Oscars, because international features, particularly international animated features, have found it easier to get into the Oscars over recent years. So ARCO is a strong contender, at least perceived to be a strong contender. And I kind of understand why. I mean, the weird thing that kept coming to mind whilst watching ARCO is Amblin movies, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. You know, things like The Goonies, like E.T., things of that ilk, because we have 2 10-year-old children from, you know, different worlds, different times, fighting against the adults, having a sense of abandonment because the little girl Iris, which is a significant name, but Iris is basically abandoned. We never physically see her parents. They're always holograms because they're off working. They don't seem to care that much about their daughter. So she's got abandonment issues. ARCO has come from the future, has stolen the equipment to come from the future because he wanted to see dinosaurs and he fucked it up, so he's ended up in the future. But it's 2075 is the earlier time frame with Iris. We don't get a date for ARCO's time, but it's clearly a long way into the future. So I mean, it's all different time periods. It's different types of dystopia as well. You have these 2 kids who are on their own and going on an adventure. You've even got 3 wearing primary coloured zoot suits and weird rainbow peaked glasses, very odd costumes. But they're idiots. So I was instantly reminded of the Fratellis from The Goonies. And I mean, this was the English dub, which I wasn't aware of. I didn't even know that the English dub was ready yet. I mean, I guessed one might be coming, but it's got a really good cast. And these 3 idiots are played by Will Ferrell, Andy Samberg, and Flea. I mean, that's a decent voice cast. And Iris's parents are played by Natalie Portman, who is also a producer on the film, which I didn't know, and Mark Ruffalo. And they've left the care of Iris, who's about 10, and their baby son to a robot. And the voice of the robot, named Mickey, gender neutral name, is both voices of the parents left, so both the mother and the father. And when a mother might be needed, Natalie Portman's voice is a little higher in the mix. When a father might be needed, Mark Ruffalo's voice is higher in the mix. But they're both speaking at the same time through this robot, which I think it is very a valid point to make. I mean, it's the second film in reasonably quick succession I've seen after watching Space Cadet at Leeds. it's kind of a similar thing, you know, leaving a robot to raise your kids. And that's the dystopia of 2075, of Iris's time. Basically, the robo-apocalypse has happened. Robots are doing everything. All of Iris's teachers are robots. Obviously, there's this robot nanny. All the police are robots. Everything is being done by robots. They've taken over. We're still in charge, but every job, not even every menial job, but seemingly pretty much every job is done by robots. And that's kind of a dystopia, isn't it? And you know, and having this girl named Iris. Iris was the Greek god, was a goddess, was the personification of the rainbow. So it's significant that the girl is named Iris. Although for the last 20 years, whenever anybody is named Iris, there's only one thing that comes to mind.
And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand.
Great song. They just randomly named it Iris. But anyway. So yeah, the robot apocalypse has happened and everything is being done by robots. And in ARCO's time, they live on floating islands in the sky because the earth, the land underneath them, is completely flooded. So in ARCO's time, it's an environmental catastrophe. In Iris's time, it's a robot catastrophe. Different types of dystopia, and we explore them all. And we also explore that abandonment of Iris essentially being raised by a robot and kind of also having to raise her baby brother. Because the robot can't do all of it, so this 10-year-old girl is to some degree responsible for her baby brother, which is something of an issue. I mean, this is a time travel story. I mean, ARCO does come from the far distant future to our future. And when you have a time travel story, you need to know what type of time travel it is. I mean, what are the rules? Is it a bootstrap paradox? Is it a relativity thing, which everything is going to happen anyway? Or is it a causal loop where what happens with the time traveller goes forward? I mean, with ARCO being so obsessed with dinosaurs, I was pretty sure we were going to have a bootstrap paradox. You know, like Ray Bradbury's Sound of Thunder, you step on the butterfly in the dinosaur area and when you get back, suddenly nobody can read. I was expecting that, it wasn't that. So that was interesting, but still, ARCO's obsessed with dinosaurs. Yeah, and the style of this film, the look of this film, I thought was interesting. I mean, compared to Little Amélie, which I saw earlier in the morning, ARCO is a much more traditional looking cel-drawn style animated film. I mean, it's got line drawings which have then been filled in, unlike the somewhat painted look of Little Amélie. I mean, it looks like an anime. So yeah, I mean, the visual style of ARCO I don't think is outstanding, but the plot is excellent. And the things it says about friendship, about abandonment, about different types of dystopia, I think ARCO's really good. So yeah, I think that was another winner. Do I prefer it to Little Amélie? I think I do, actually. So yeah, I think ARCO is another yay. It's got some things on its mind, and yeah, even some points to make about, you know, environmentalism and all that stuff. So yeah, I think ARCO was pretty good. And then immediately afterwards, we had The Last Blossom, which did have an in-person Q&A with the director, who doesn't speak much English, and I ducked out halfway through it, unfortunately having to walk in front of the screen, but because I was paranoid about catching my coach. So yes, this is a film. I didn't fully appreciate what the plot of this film was, but The Last Blossom in question is a balsam plant, a weed, which is in the cell of a man who's been given a Yakuza who's been given a life sentence and is dying. He's coming to the end of his life, and he has this balsam plant in his cell which he has conversations with. This is a Yakuza film, a Yakuza anime, with a talking plant. And remarkably, it works. I mean, it helps that the lines that this plant has is very wry, very witty, very acerbic. I mean, poking holes in the story, because basically what it is this old guy, this dying guy, is telling his life story to the plants and having conversations. So having that setup, it could be pretty silly, but I think it actually works because of the style of this plant. And the way it doesn't take shit, the way it talks back, literally and metaphorically. And through this conversation, we get to see this story of why this guy ended up in jail, why he's going to die in jail after spending 30 years in a cell. And it turns out to be a somewhat typical gangster story, revolving around loyalty and regret. And yeah, we've kind of seen similar things before, but it's executed really well. It's just got a really, really quirky narrator or framing device to tell the story. So I mean, it's got all this stuff about loyalty and regret. It's got stuff about how this particular type of Yakuza, I mean, the film is mostly, the flashbacks are in 1986, and the point is made repeatedly that this is kind of a transition point for the Yakuza, going from sort of like, we're tattooed guys with guns to, hey, maybe we should be a little bit legit. Hey, there's so much money in real estate, why don't we do that as well, or instead? So there's this kind of guy and his best friend, who is unfailingly loyal to his absolute detriment. They are dinosaurs, and that point is made. And also, he's got the guy's got a really weird situation at home, because he met this girl in a bar. She turned out to be pregnant already, and yet he still asked her to move in. So eventually this ersatz family of this Yakuza, this single mother and this growing kid, I mean, by the time at the end of the flashbacks, he's probably about 3 or 4. It's an ersatz family, yet it's not a blood family. So how does he feel about that? And how does he feel about this woman? Because he is absolutely incapable of telling her he loves her, which he clearly does. Why else would you get this pregnant woman to move in with you? You're in love with her. And there's growing affection for the kid as well, and he never ever says it to the kid, but the kid is his son. Not biologically, but he is his son. Yet he cannot say it. And this very taciturn, very reserved man, I mean, maybe it's something about the Japanese character, possibly, but he just cannot tell his family that he loves them, and that causes issues. And he ends up getting sent to jail for 30 years, and because he's not married, or even common law married, she can't even visit him in jail. So no contact for 30 odd years, or face-to-face contact anyway. He sends letters, which becomes a really interesting plot point. And also the board game Othello, which seems to be called something different in Japan, and maybe it's even a Japanese game that got imported here, but the Othello, where you turn over black and white counters and try and take over the board. The girl and this Yakuza player, and the girl is always winning. And it eventually turns out maybe he's letting her win, possibly, could be, But I mean, Othello is a weirdly important part of this film as well. But yeah, I mean, this really reminded me of two films. I mean, Little Shop of Horrors, you know, a talking plant which is sort of somewhat aggressive and not complimentary to the person that they're talking to, and Remains of the Day. It's a very, very strange double bill. I mean, Little Shop of Horrors and Remains of the Day. But in Remains of the Day, the whole point of the film, the whole point is that Anthony Hopkins cannot tell Emma Thompson he loves her. Cannot. And will not. And that's kind of the same thing here. So yeah, The Last Blossom is kind of a cross between Little Shop of Horrors and Remains of the Day. And a little bit of The Irishman, well actually a lot of The Irishman. So like that idea of regret at the end of a gangster's life. So yeah, Little Shop of Horrors meets The Irishman meets Remains of the Day. Weird combination, but it's executed really well. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say this was outstanding. It's just really, really well executed. So yeah, I think this will be on the Oscar eligible animated films list, and I think it might make my list. Actually, it probably won't, but I still liked it a lot, and if you do have the opportunity to see it, I do recommend it. So yeah, another yay for The Last Blossom. So that's 3 films today and 3 yays. They programmed them well at the Manchester Animation Festival. So yes, I need to go and have something to eat and get on my coach. I'm not going to get home tonight, well tomorrow morning, it's about 5 o'clock in the morning, because the coach is so long and I've got an hour-long layover in Birmingham, which is annoying. But there we go. So yeah, I'm not getting home for a very, very long time, and I've barely had any sleep, so this is going to be fun. But yeah, I may as well sign off. So if you've watched this first video, maybe I deserve a like. You can also leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do anything which helps the algorithm promote this tiny, tiny little channel. But for right now, I think that is where I leave you, and all that remains for me to say is this has been a presentation of the Yay, Nay or Meh channel, and I'll see you next time where I shine a light on TV and cinema, both obvious and obscure.